Que lo que mi gente, welcome to the Monoplaza F1 podcast. As always, I'm your host, Emi Vitre, and this week we're going to be covering the Japanese Grand Prix. This week's episode is sponsored by No, I don't have any sponsors. I'm just really tired, so give me a second. I'm going to drink this coffee. Yeah, I will be 100,000% happy when this leg of the F1 season is over because, frankly, I love watching races live, but staying up from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. to watch something is not a lot of fun. Anyways, you guys don't care about that. Yeah, first and foremost, congratulations, Max Verstappen P1, Checo Perez P2, Red Bull racing for the victory in Japan. And what a shocker. A come from behind victory for Mac. No, that didn't happen. Not at all. It was never in doubt that Red Bull was going to win. And yes, this year wasn't as dominant. He only beat Checo by 12 and a half seconds as opposed to last year where he beat, I don't remember who, by 22 seconds. Yeah, Red Bull continues to do what it is supposed to do, which is win. And for the first time, not for the first time, and Checo, to his credit, showed exactly what a driver in the second seat of that Red Bull driving an Adrian Newey rocket ship should be doing. Yeah, first things first, and I'll get this out of the way real quick. Max Verstappen, I don't think there was ever any doubt that he was going to be victorious. You have to give credit for the meticulousness into which he prepares himself and drives. I will say that half the battle obviously is having a great car. The second half of that is being a good driver, and right now I'm putting it more on the car and the driver. Do with that what you will. But yes, he has not had to fight a lot of people on track for the lead or for race wins. But regardless, he's still doing what he's supposed to be doing. So congratulations, Max Verstappen, P1. Boom, done. All right, get that out of the way. Yeah. Checo. El Viejo Sabroso had an incredibly consistent weekend and a great showing. Now, if you are a fan of other sports, so if you watch basketball, baseball, football, any sport where there is a contract, you will often hear the phrase contract year. Checo Perez is driving like someone who is in a contract year. Hey, and don't take it from me. Those are also the words of the infamous Dr. Helmut Marko, alias El Doctor Muerte, who also said, yes, Checo's driving great. It makes sense. His contract is up, blah, 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 this, that, and the third. And really the only reason I'm bringing that up is to touch on the simple observation that we may have, no, not we, Red Bull, maybe both the fans and Red Bull have talked about Checo's demise maybe a little bit too soon. Now, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but the long story short of it is that Daniel Ricciardo has been considered as the heir apparent to the second Red Bull seat. I think that is an absolute disaster class of a mistake because not only is Checo younger than Ricciardo, he is also giving you more than Ricciardo. For starters, in Latin America, in the North American market, amongst Latin Americans, Checo is perhaps the most popular driver. So we're talking about Canada, the United States of North America, the United States of Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, and parts of South America, if not all of South America. That is a pretty big revenue stream. So money, he's bringing it. Sponsorship, all of that. Money machine for Red Bull. Consistency as a driver, yeah, sure. Last year, maybe not as much. This year, off to a rocky start, but for the most part, still doing what he's supposed to be doing. And I'm seeing more out of Checo than I have seen out of Daniel Ricciardo in the last 3 years, right? So I'm talking about Ricciardo's last year at McLaren, maybe the first or the second half of his first year at McLaren, his last year at McLaren. He was out for the first couple months or several months of the season in 2023. And now with VCARB, yeah, not doing so great. But again, we'll touch on that later. For me, I'm super happy that Checo is at least showing the caliber of driver that he is. And frankly, whether or not he'll be able to mount a serious challenge to Verstappen, he is exactly what Red Bull needs as a second driver. I've talked about it often. He is somebody who can defend. He is somebody who, when is called upon to defend and or block and or give Max some time to do whatever he needs to do, he has been able to do it. See the 2021 season and the defense that he played against Lewis Hamilton. So again, for me, Checo has been showing the skills of a driver who, at a bare minimum, deserves another year at Red Bull. If they want to get super ambitious, you can give him a 2-year contract until 2026. It doesn't really matter for me. Checo obviously is playing up to his skill level, and that may very well be because it is a contract year. Now, where will he land next year if he doesn't get his contract renewed by Red Bull? I have zero idea. I doubt Checo has a lot of interest in going to a team like Williams, who might have an open seat once they realize that Logan Sargent is the way they need to go. He might go to Haas if Nico Hülkenberg goes to Audi. He may go to Aston Martin if Fernando Alonso, for example, gets a drive somewhere else. None of those seem like realistic options. None of those. Red Bull offers him the biggest chance to remain in a competitive team. Now, if his goal, like his father said, is to remain in F1 until 2033, right, or a 10-year plan, then I would assume that Checo would just want to get a drive wherever he gets a drive. Now, if his goal is to be on a competitive team, then yeah, he should continue to drive at the level he is used to, because Red Bull offers him the only opportunity to be on a competitive team. I highly doubt, by the way, I mentioned Aston Martin, I highly doubt that Lawrence Stroll will contract Checo Perez to be on his team, considering that Lawrence Stroll has already fired him. Yeah. So, in any case, shouts out to Checo Perez, and frankly, again, he did what he had to do. The last time out, he finished in P5 in Australia. Post-race, he kind of told on himself a little bit. I touched on that last episode where Checo was saying, you know, if Max had stayed in the race, more than likely would still have lost to Ferrari. Maybe you would have lost to Ferrari. As a matter of fact, you did lose to Ferrari. But I highly doubt that Max Verstappen would have lost to Ferrari. So telling ourselves a little bit, Checo. Yeah, in any case, elite form from him in Suzuka. Did really great. Yeah, I don't think Red Bull could have asked anything else of him. Frankly, it'll be interesting to see what happens in China. Of course, it's a course that Checo is used to racing, and a couple of drivers are, but some of the newer guys aren't used to it. So, yeah, man, I don't know. Shouts out to Checo. You know, as they say in Spanish, to you, Checo, I say, sin miedo al éxito. I guess, you know, push it forward. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Now, I would say overall, the race in general, I probably should have led off with this, was not a terrible race, right? Again, I don't think there was never any doubt that Red Bull was going to win. However, it was not a clear cut. They just ran off into the sunset, straight to Shanghai, went Max Verstappen while everybody completed their laps. They did have to put some strategy with their tires, put some strategy in when they were going to pit. Verstappen obviously listened to his TP, or not his TP, sorry, his engineer. I don't think Verstappen's listening to Christian Horner much these days. And yeah, it was a race where we saw Ferrari past the McLarens, where we saw Ferrari do some incredible pit stops, where we saw McLaren in the form of Lando Norris do some things and ultimately got his race ruined by his strategy or his team. That's okay. But yeah, overall, I would say it was a great race. Yeah, Yuki Tsunoda was able to score some points at home. I can't say that I'm, I guess, disappointed in the race. I'd say probably the only disappointment is that I'm on this side of the world. And again, I had to wake up so early to watch that race live. Yeah. Anyways, So yeah, great race overall. Great showing by Red Bull. Great showing by Verstappen. Great showing by Checo Perez. And I'm done talking about Red Bull. I gave them all their flowers. Blah blah blah. This, that, and the third. All the records they're breaking. Congratulations. And hey, look what happens. Their marketing strategy of just ignoring all of the scandals surrounding all the shisty stuff that Christian Horner did has paid off. Because guess what? We are no longer talking about that. I mean, I'm still talking about it right now. But yeah, it looks like things have settled down. Joss, shut up. Helmut Marko, shut up. Christian Horner, shut up. The only victim, obviously, is Horner's accuser. I'm never going to be quiet about that, by the way. But yeah. Great rebound, and who knows what will happen next year. Again, I highly doubt that Max Verstappen is going to leave Red Bull. Why would he? But we'll see. Maybe we'll be surprised in April or sometime in July with what they call the silly season, right? Anyways, on to Ferrari now. Ferrari. Wow. They're a team that I am cautiously optimistic about this year. Now, in times past, Ferrari's issue has been tire degradation. And I say in times past, this is definitely a recency bias. Since the ground effect rules have come into place, Ferrari has had huge problems with tire degradation. Super great on one lap pace, right? Because you saw that Charles Leclerc had strung together a bunch of poles. Didn't always convert those poles to victory. You saw that Carlos Sainz got a couple poles himself, converted one of those into a victory in Singapore last year. But the problem always was recently with Ferrari that in spite of having great single lap pace, tire deg always did them in the end, and they always ended up losing out to the Mercedes. And obviously last year they finished in P3 in the constructors behind Mercedes. This year that does not seem to be the case, and I'm cautiously optimistic for several reasons. The obvious one is it may make this season a lot more interesting than last season. Please, dear Lord, let this be an interesting season for F1 competition. Amen. Anyways, and so Ferrari's doing great. Now, Charles Leclerc didn't have the best qualifying, made a couple of mistakes. It happens, sure, and ended up P8 position starting. Carlos Sainz was able to string some stuff together and finished up ahead of Charles Leclerc. But again, great showing. Now, we mentioned contract year. Carlos Sainz is in a bit of a contract year, but a little bit different. Obviously, he does not have a drive with Ferrari next year. Obviously, he wants to land on a top team. He has been linked with going back to Red Bull, which is a team that he started with. He's been linked with Aston Martin. Okay. He's been linked with Mercedes at some point. The biggest thing that I would say with Carlos Sainz is that it looks like the best option for him is Audi. I mentioned that his father obviously has ties to Audi. Carlos Sainz, for whatever reason, I think has a good shot at being a Ferrari. Now, whether or not Sainz himself will want to go to Audi, not Ferrari, to Audi, is completely up to him. But you cannot say that this season he hasn't been doing amazing things. And by the way, his skill was never called into question. If anything, based on his performances, he's been on podium every time he's raced this year. The skill was never into question. Now, what is being questioned, obviously, is did Ferrari make the correct move in not renewing him and signing Lewis Hamilton? Now, I talked about how Lewis Hamilton is a once-in-a-generation talent, greatest of all time. This, that, and the third. Maybe not in his prime, but definitely not a driver on the decline, in my opinion. And I feel like the upside to Lewis Hamilton is that you get a great driver for a few more years, and then you get to build a team around a more seasoned Charles Leclerc, who maybe will have matured, and an incoming Oliver Burman. Right now, they surely could have done this with Carlos Sainz at the helm in that other seat. But yeah. It doesn't matter. Sainz has proved that he is a driver that is deserving of a competitive seat. Again, this is another driver that I highly doubt will want to go to Williams, highly doubt will want to go to Haas. Maybe not so much in Mercedes, possibly Aston Martin. Doubt he'd want to go to Red Bull. By the way, going to Red Bull would be terrible for Carlos Sainz as long as Max Verstappen and Jos Verstappen are on there. Carlos Sainz Sr., Carlos Sainz Jr., Jos Verstappen, Max Verstappen. The dynamics of that would be great for Liberty Media and Drive to Survive, but terrible for team dynamics. And if you're not a fan of Red Bull, great implosion. Awesome. But I don't think Carlos Sainz will go there. And frankly, I don't even think he's really legitimately on the radar. That being said, Sainz had a great drive, had great pace, ended up finishing the race in P3. Strategy was great. Pace was great. Again, it is great to see that Ferrari has a car that once they took care of the tire degradation issue, which again, it seems like they have given their drivers a car that is predictable, a car that has pace, a car that is fast, and a car that has not completely met the challenge, but it's getting closer and closer to meet the challenge with Red Bull. And by the way, it makes sense, right? We are in year 3 of these new ground effects. So of course, the gap to Red Bull is going to be tightening because there's only so much that Red Bull can continue iterating on and improving with the car. Obviously, next season, which will be the last season with these new regulations, you'll see a little bit more competitiveness from everybody else. But it's nice to see that we are seeing it from Ferrari in particular. Love what Freddie Vasseur is doing there, by the way. Now, on the other side of the garage, we talk about Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc actually had the best pace overall in the last stint of the race. His race, I wouldn't say it was ruined so much by strategy since he called his own shot, had a great recovery drive, ended up getting driver of the day, but he went from P8 to P4. And what was great about that is that Charles Leclerc really took matters into his own hand. Obviously, the team had ideas, right, about like where they wanted to take that and what they wanted to do. Charles Leclerc said, no gracias, grazie mille, ma no. And so he did his own thing and was able to again prove that Charles Leclerc is somebody who is destined for greatness and is already really great, and understandably so. This is why Ferrari wants to keep him. And it's good to see that, again, Leclerc is a driver that I feel like if the car is not perfect, he may struggle slightly. I feel like the car is almost in that window that it is going to be perfect, and we're going to see more out of Charles Leclerc in terms of he's going to get these poles and potentially get these victories. Upgrades for Ferrari are coming in Imola. So look forward to seeing that happen, which is great, right? Because they were able to close the gap to Red Bull. Obviously, again, let me be clear. It was never in question whether or not they were going to beat Red Bull this race. The question really was how close could they get to Red Bull? And they have shown that the pace is there. Once these upgrades are there, it will be interesting. So, yeah, without any upgrades, Ferrari did great. By the way, it's boding really well for Lewis Hamilton, too, because that's going to be his team next year. All right. Yeah, so we'll see. It's also just been great to see Ferrari do better things with the car, do better things with their strategy. It really looks like Fred has that team under control. Again, the only question for me is going to be what happens next year when you have 2 number 1 drivers. I have always believed that a team only functions really well when there is a clear number 1 driver and number 2 driver. You see it right now. Red Bull, I don't care what anybody says. Max Verstappen, clear number 1 driver. Checo Perez, clear number 2 driver, right? The last time we saw in recent history 2 quote-unquote number 1 drivers was Britt Sadie's with Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton, that ended in disaster, with Nico Rosberg ultimately retiring because he couldn't handle the mental wear that it was having on him. So Ferrari, it'll be interesting to see what happens next year, but don't get ahead of yourselves. It really feels like this year they are going to bring that challenge to Red Bull. And they are clear challenger to that team. So we'll see. But I'm cautiously optimistic about what's going to happen with them throughout the rest of the season. Now, a team that I would say I wasn't disappointed in their drivers. I was just kind of disappointed in the strategy. Was McLaren. You saw that Lando Norris was able to put together a decent qualifying lap. Obviously, he started P3 on the grid. I felt like, yeah, McLaren did not have the pace to beat Ferrari, but with some good pit stops, I think they probably would have ended on the podium. So maybe the strategy to bring in Lando at the same time as Leclerc, obviously hindsight is 2020. It did not pay off. Now, Lando, to his credit, said to the team, hey, I'm good on these tires. Do we want to maybe wait a little bit because I feel like my pace is still there? The team said, no, we want to go ahead and pit you now. And so they did. Now, of course, when you do that, you have to make sure that the pit stop is a clutch pit stop, right? And this one was not. McLaren has a good pit crew. So that, sure, was never really going to come into question. But him and Leclerc came in at the same time. Leclerc ended up coming out in front of Lando. And that was pretty much the race for Lando in terms of a podium. Because as I mentioned earlier, Leclerc was having a hell of a drive and ended up finishing in P4. And Lando ended up finishing in P5. Now, I question the strategy decision to bring him in. Again, Andrea Stella said, maybe for the fans, it wasn't an interesting race, but for us, it presented a very complicated situation with the tire choices and whether it was going to be a one-stopper or a two-stopper. In any case, I do feel like, obvious statement, that strategy decision to pit him at the same time as Leclerc probably cost him a podium because, sure, maybe they did not have the pace to beat Ferrari, but they at least had the pace to keep up with Ferrari, and who knows what would have happened. Obviously, it would have put more pressure on Ferrari to continue executing, but with Sainz in P3 and Leclerc in P4 and the team basically telling them to not race each other, that solidified the position for Ferrari. Now, with McLaren, again, if Lando would have pitted at a different time, or maybe the strategy was a little bit different, the pressure would have been there and they would have gone racing. So again, it's not a terrible place to start, to finish, but definitely a podium potentially could have been on for Lando Norris. On the other side of the garage, my boy Oscar had a pretty quiet race, pretty low key. He ended up finishing, I think it was like P8 for him. No complaints about Oscar. The one thing I will say is shouts out to him and shouts out to Zach Brown for making the decision that they did 2 years ago when they decided, hey, Oscar, why don't you come here to McLaren? I can't admit, nope. I got you. And the reason I say that is because of the state Alpine is in currently. And a very funny and interesting fact. Oscar Piastri has scored 129 points since he has been at McLaren. Can you guess how many points Alpine has scored in that time frame? Yep, 129 points, and they are now Alpine is solidly at the bottom of the midfield. Okay, maybe they're tied for last with Williams. But in any case, shouts out to Oscar. The future is looking bright for you, young man. And by the way, happy 23rd birthday, belatedly. Anyways, Oscar had a pretty low-key race. Didn't end up on the podium. Was never going to be on the podium. But yeah, overall, just like, I don't know. I continue to be impressed by McLaren. I continue to be impressed by what Zach Brown is doing. I think the disappointment for me is how they did Lando. And the question for me is, what is going to happen with those two as Oscar continues to grow in his career, as Oscar continues to bring that challenge to Lando, as Lando feels the mounting pressure of not having any F1 victories to his name, right? He's now Either he has the record or tied for the record of most podium appearances without a P1. Yeah, it's definitely a good problem to have at McLaren. They definitely have a lot of people waiting in the ranks to come up and be a driver for the F1 team. But yeah, whatever. Overall, just not a terrible race for McLaren. Just I think they could have done better. Yeah, I know. I just feel like they definitely could have done better. The person who did have an amazing race, in my opinion, is the hometown hero, the homeboy Yuki Tsunoda. La Yukita. He continues to prove that he is a driver who is deserving of more respect. And I've seen a lot of maturity coming out of Yuki. Obviously, you have noticed, or maybe you haven't, that the cussing has stopped. You have noticed that Yuki has matured in terms of what he is doing. You have noticed that Yuki has beaten everybody that has been put in front of him since Pierre Gasly left, right? So De Vries, nope, out. Liam Lawson, which proved a more formidable challenger than De Vries, Yuki still qualified him. And now the aging Daniel Ricciardo has stepped up to the plate and spectacularly has failed to beat him in qualifying this season. Now, points are not scored in qualifying. I understand that. But out of the two, Yuki Tsunoda has been the only one who has brought points to VCarb Toro Rosso 2.0, whatever you want to call that. And so yeah, let's put some respect behind Yuki's name, and I think a lot of people are seeing that. Now, what I don't understand is why Red Bull is not seriously consider giving Yuki Tsunoda a second audition, or not a second audition, but an audition for that second seat in Red Bull. Yuki is somebody who clearly has the potential to do great things. Now, is he of the caliber of a Red Bull driver, senior team, whatever you want to call that? I don't know, but he's definitely a more viable option, in my opinion, than Daniel Ricciardo. And yet I don't know why they're not giving him an opportunity to do that. Now, if Yuki doesn't get a shot at Red Bull, the question that I would have is, VCarb, are you going to extend him for more than 1 year? And are you going to build a team around him and Liam Lawson? Or are you going to let him go? And if that's the case, is Yuki going to end up at Aston Martin, which, again, I've mentioned before, Honda is going to be the works manufacturer, the engine manufacturer for Aston Martin. And so obviously it's logical that they would want a Japanese driver to be in that seat. Now, whether Aston Martin is going to continue to have just one driver, because you can go ahead and ignore Lance Stroll and only have room for one more driver, that's really solely up to them. Would they have more success if they have a combo of Yuki Tsunoda and Fernando Alonso, or are they just going to continue to keep Lance Stroll there? But in any case, Yuki has proved that he is a driver who is meriting or worthy of more respect. And it was great to see that he was able to put a great drive together. Had some overtakes, just consistent overtakes. Very impressive. Probably the only one I wasn't impressed with was the overtake he did on the Alpine, without DRS, by the way. Just because the Alpine, bottom of the basement, bottom feeders, whatever you want to call them, it has been crazy to see what Alpine what they have fallen to this year, and it's going to take them a long time to improve on that. Now, we'll see as it goes, but now you have Yuki 4-0 against Daniel Ricciardo. Yuki's only scored all the points for VCarb and is keeping them at the top of the midfield and is consistent. So we'll see. The other side of the garage, obviously I touched on this, is Daniel Ricciardo. I am wondering what will be the threshold for VCarb in terms of their patience with Daniel Ricciardo. Now, Ricciardo is saying, I'm still getting used to the car, or something's different about the car. I don't doubt that Ricciardo is a talented driver. Out of the two, he is the only one in that team who has race wins to his name. He's got 8 of those, right? Out of the two, he's the only one who's touched a podium. However, that was the Daniel Ricciardo of the past. The Daniel Ricciardo that we have seen this season and towards the end of last season, barring Mexico, all right? has not really given me much of an impression. Right now, we know that perhaps the reason he's being considered at Red Bull is because he's Christian Horner's boy. Christian Horner loves him some Daniel Ricciardo. But frankly, again, recency bias. What has Daniel Ricciardo done for me, for you, for the team, for everybody lately? And what gives Daniel Ricciardo the pedigree to remain in that V-carb seat with Liam Lawson waiting in the ranks and rumors coming out that Lawson is guaranteed a seat in 2025. Now, I don't see Lawson in Red Bull because, again, why would you put Lawson in Red Bull when Yuki Tsunoda is right there? I 100% see Lawson in V-carb next year, but where does that leave Daniel Ricciardo? Again, I touched on it earlier. Do we really want to take a Checo Perez, who is younger than Ricciardo, albeit only by about 5 months, whatever, and whose skill seems to be on the decline, or maybe it isn't, maybe it really is just a car, and keep him there or put him in a Red Bull seat when you have Liam Lawson waiting in the ranks, who's much younger, and the upside seems to be higher for Lawson. Again, I will be the first one to say that more than likely this is recency bias on my end, right? The last clear memory of Ricciardo that I have is the 2022 season where he was doing terrible at McLaren and lost his seat at McLaren. Then I look at 2023 where he was out for the bulk of the year and ended up replacing Nick DeVries because he did great in a test at Silverstone in a Red Bull seat. Awesome. Ultimately, the hand injury put him out for a couple weeks, and you saw that Liam Lawson was a great replacement. So again, out of Ricciardo, barring Mexico last year. So last year, the bar was, wow, this is a guy who hasn't raced in 8 months, and look at him. He is actually really great considering he's not in shape. Cool. This is a guy who broke his wrist at Zandvoort, and now look at him and what he's doing. Great. So he was getting the benefit of the doubt for time off, getting the benefit of the doubt for injury recovery. I hear you. But what's the excuse this year? He has had the opportunity to get used to that car. He spent winter in the simulators. He's had opportunities to have practices in that car. Now, granted, Japan was one where he did not get to practice in FP1. Cool. FP2 was literally a wash. And so really he only got one practice, and that was FP3. All right, sure. I'll give him that. So the next time out in China, we shall see what happens. But right now, I'm not seeing anything from Daniel Ricciardo that makes me think, hey, yeah, let's put him in the second Red Bull seat. All right. Again, it's recency bias. And I, again, will say I am adamant in that Yuki Tsunoda has done more than enough to prove he, at a bare minimum, deserves a shot at that second Red Bull seat. At a bare minimum, deserves to be on a team that takes him seriously. And at a bare minimum, deserves to be a team that is competitive. So, again, I feel like the best landing spot for Tsunoda, if they don't give him a significant contract extension, is Aston Martin. So, yeah. Now, will Daniel Ricciardo still be in the V-car next season? I don't know. Is he going to be in Red Bull next season? I hope not, frankly, but we'll see what happens. Now, moving on to one last thing. No. One last thing. Again, shouts out to Yuki, La Yuquita, again, proving, I know I said it already, but I just don't want you to forget this. He scored some points on his home race. He knows that track like the back of his hand and is doing the best he can with that car. Seen a lot of growth, seen a lot of maturity. Really loving what Yuki is doing. All right, that's it. Just big shout out to La Yuquita. The team that I was actually disappointed in really was Williams. Now, Williams continues to have the worst luck on the grid, but lately they've made some really puzzling decisions with what they're doing. Now, what I mean by that is this. Williams had the opportunity to come in and do really great things. With James Vaughn, you understand the dire straits that the team was in. So last time out in Australia, Alex Albon wrecked his car. During one of the practices. Cool. The team then made the decision to give Logan Sargent's car to Alex Albon. At the time, the decision seemed really cold-hearted, cold-blooded, blah, 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 blah. But pragmatically, it's understandable why the team would decide to do that. One, during his tenure at Williams, Logan Sargent has only gotten 1 point for the team. And the only reason he got that point was because Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc were disqualified, which elevated him into the points. Great. Awesome. Since then, Logan Sargent has been out-qualified by his teammate. He is on a, God, what is it? 27-0? 27-0 since he didn't even start last race. And don't quote me on it, but it's some astronomical figure. So again, last time out, it made sense. We're going to give Logan, we're going to give your car to Alex. Now, if I was Logan, I would have done exactly what Max Verstappen had said. I would have either wrecked that car into oblivion. I guess we don't have any cars. Or I would have just hopped on my jet and see you at the next race. Don't count on me. He's a good sport. I understand why Logan is trying to do that. He's trying to get in good graces with the team so that they extend him for next year. I highly doubt that that'll be enough. Anyways, okay. So the car was wrecked. They gave Logan's car to Alex Albon. Now the pressure was on Alex Albon to score some points. You represent the highest chance we have of getting that. Alex Albon did not score any points. Finished out of the points in Australia. Cool. So now we're in Japan. In Japan, Alex Albon's chassis has been repaired. Awesome, great. We have it here for Japan, and we're going to give it to Logan. So not only did Logan Sargent not get his car back, he now gets the repaired chassis of Alex Albon's wrecked car. Again, mind-boggling, whatever. Alex Albon then proceeds to wreck Logan Sargent's car in the race, first lap. And so Alex Albon has a distinct pleasure. I don't know if that's a record that exists in F1. It most likely does. Alex Albon has a distinct pleasure of being responsible for the wreck of both of the team's cars. Williams does not have the luxury to continue to wreck cars like that. Obviously, Logan Sargent also had an accident during FP1. Cool. So he re-wrecked Alex Albon's car, whatever, no damage to the chassis. He missed FP2, but frankly, so did everybody else. All right. Now, the problem is that Alex Albon, I think, is not handling the pressure well. And what I mean by that is this. Alex Albon is very cognizant of the fact that Williams does not have the facilities, the capacity, the funds to have their drivers make mistakes. Williams, they don't have any extra chassis. They don't have that many parts. They were literally using an Excel spreadsheet to inventory all this. Everything is so archaic. Alex Albon, right before his wreck, he would later say that the thing that he was saying, this is probably not what should be happening right now. And so I do feel like Albon is feeling the pressure of not wrecking these cars, and that's taking his mind off of, I want to race aggressively and I want to do what I got to do, and putting his mind on, I got to race cautiously because I'd rather finish this race than wreck this car and ruin our position for the upcoming race. So Williams has a tremendous, just like a crazy problem in that not only are they ruining the confidence of their number 2 driver in Logan Sargent, but now they're also starting to chip away at the confidence of their number 1 driver by saying, Alex, you've got this. You represent the best chance we have at earning points. And Alex, instead of being focused on getting points and winning the race, is more focused on not wrecking the car. So you see what the problem is? Ruin the confidence of their number 2 driver, starting to chip away at the confidence of their number 1 driver. They are in a predicament. They need more sponsors. They need whatever. On the flip side, if there's more problems in China, my suggestion to James Valls would be this. Hey, last time out, we tried it with Alex. That did not work. This time out, we're just going to go ahead and give Logan a shot. Because honestly, again, I'm like most of you. I don't understand why Logan Sargent was not given a chance to score points in Australia. I understand statistically, Alex Albon represented the best chance they had at scoring points. Logan Sargent was re-signed by Williams. James Valls didn't have to do that. And it was a move that everyone scratched their heads at. But Vols said, no, we have data. Maybe Vols had access to something that we don't. I don't know. But the mere fact that he re-signed Logan Sargent and him stating we have confidence in Logan, he's a capable and competent driver. Right now, it's a lot of this, a lot of blah, blah, blah. All right. Vols, show me, don't tell me. That's literally where I am with him Logan Sargent. If Logan Sargent is not their driver, if Logan Sargent is not the guy that they have confidence in, that's fine. Don't re-sign him. You shouldn't have re-signed him. You've got people waiting in the wings. I'm sure Toto Wolff is going to worm his way in there and get Antonelli in that seat next year, right? They've got decent juniors, right? My point here is that if you were not going to give Logan Sargent a legitimate chance, you should not have re-signed him. And I reiterate, once again, you have already basically destroyed the confidence of your American driver, and now the pressure of not crashing and not messing up and not ruining equipments has forced your number one driver to drive, in my opinion, scared. More worried about wrecking the car and ruining the team than actually scoring points. And you're not succeeding at anything. It's like in Spanish, specifically Mexican Spanish, you have this thing, el perro de las dos tortas, right? He has an opportunity to score the most points, and right now Vols is trying to make the most out of the situation. It's just not working out for him. So again, figure that out. Really disappointed. By the way, obviously Alex Albon, DNF. Logan Sargent had a really great drive considering, but still out of the points. Williams, I really want them to get together. It's a team that I really love watching. I really am, in spite of the criticism, a fan of James Vols. But again, show me, don't tell me. If Logan Sargent is your driver, then treat him as such. Give him back his car and let him do his thing. And if it doesn't pan out, don't re-sign him next year. It's not that simple. Or actually, it is that simple. It's not that complicated. Apologies. The other team that I was really, 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 really disappointed in was Mercedes. Mercedes, what is going on? Oh, my goodness. Their struggles continue. Wolff GPT, because that's really what it feels like. Every time Wolff talks, Wolff, the TP for Mercedes, talks, it really feels like he inputs something into a chat GPT about some lukewarm statement. Yeah, we really got some great learnings from this weekend, and the simulator showed us this, the data showing us this, and we're really confident that we understand what's happening with the car, and we're taking the car in a really positive. It doesn't matter. All right. So from now until the end of the season, until Mercedes says something, he's going to be called Wolff GPT for me, because it's disingenuous statement. And by the way, I don't know who the user was that I saw that. So I will say that nickname is not originally mine. I'm not a plagiarizer, but it is one that is sticking with me. Wolff GPT, not Chat GPT, Wolff GPT. Anyways, that car for Mercedes continues to be a problem. I said it last time. I'll say it again. I don't know how the W15 somehow turned out to be worse than the W13 and W14. W13, we judged you too harshly. We thought that was a terrible car. That car at least got a victory. Right now, the W15 is somehow worse than the 13 and the 14, and it makes sense because they spent the last couple of seasons basically saying, these are the rules, this is what's happening. We're going to go with the zero pod concept, and we're going to try that for 1.5 seasons, And now they are basically having to recover the entire time lost that they spent on a concept that they couldn't understand. Because, by the way, it's not that the zero concept or zero side pod concept couldn't work. It's just that they did not, again, have the mental facilities to understand how they could make that work, right? So, again, Mercedes came in. The one thing that is fairly apparent is that the car is so finicky that it looks like the weather is one thing that is affecting them. The car performs really well in cooler temps, not so great in warmer temperatures. And it is apparent by how they perform in FP1, FP2, and FP3 in terms of how the drivers are getting the most out of the car. Now, of course, FP2, throw that out. All right. Hamilton ended FP2 and P2 in terms of lap times. Doesn't matter. FP1, did really great. FP3 did really great. However, when you get to qualifying, the temps went up and their positions went down. So Hamilton, for the first time this season, now qualified. Russell ended up P7. Russell ended up P9. Great. So Hamilton's losing 3-1 to Russell on that. Again, no points for qualifying. I understand that. However, Mercedes got cute with their strategy, right? They said, hey, we got our drivers here. We're going to go for a one-stop race. We're going to start both of them on hards. That would ultimately cause them better positions. Now, to his credit, Wolff was confident that the team would be able to compete for some podiums. I don't know if the data actually backs that up, because I felt like Ferrari obviously faster than them, McLaren possibly faster than them, and so they're maybe on par with Aston Martin. Yeah, that strategy to start them on the hards did not pay off. They had a horrible first stint and were getting passed by cars left, right, backwards, forwards. Now, there was a restart because of the crash between Ricciardo and Albon in the first lap. First, it was red flag, then it was a restart. And during the restart, Lewis Hamilton seems to have inherited or got some damage from a clash with Charles Leclerc. Awesome. And it was really weird. And, shouts out to Lewis for being a good sport. I think Lewis understood, hey, this is what's happening in the car. I just can't get it to turn really well in the corners. And so got on the team radio and said, hey, should I just let George pass? I think his pace is faster than me. Okay, cool. So in spite of all of that, George is let through by Lewis. Great. They both realized this strategy is not really working out. And so quickly, they went from a one-stopper to realizing it's not going to work out. Now we need a two-stopper. The problem, of course, then is that it was too late. Mercedes did really well in the second and third stint, but it was too late. They had spent too much time on a terrible strategy, wasting time with those hards, and the pace was just, it was not there. Ultimately, Lewis would end the race P9, George would end the race P7, getting a pass on Oscar Piastri on lap 49 of the race. Awesome. I just don't know what the heck is going on with Mercedes. They are clearly headed the way of Williams in terms that this was a team that won, by the way, 8 consecutive constructors titles. And they haven't been able to put forward a good car since 2021. Right? So you have the W13, which was better than the W14, and the W14, which was an amalgamation of the W13 and a new concept of James Allison, which was better than whatever the W15 is. Now, the drivers say that this car is easier, better to drive. They just need to understand it. We'll see. Upgrades are coming for Mercedes. Hopefully they understand that better, but yeah, until that time, this is panning out to be a wash for them. And frankly, I don't know why any driver would want to come drive for Mercedes next year. I highly doubt Max Verstappen would want to go there unless he's looking ahead in 2026 and he feels like those rules will benefit Mercedes and will give him the opportunity to continue winning. Okay, cool. Fernando Alonso, which was another driver that was linked to Mercedes, went on to say, yeah, I don't know if I would want to move there. They don't really seem like a really attractive team for me to go to. Okay, yeah. So we will see what happens with Mercedes moving forward. It's not a situation where they're doing the best with that, right? So, yeah. I don't know. In any case, the drivers seem to understand the car. They seem to know where the weaknesses are, but we've been hearing the same story over and over and over. The question, I guess, that I have is the team is in shambles, I guess, both from a social media standpoint to the car driving to the fans to all of that, which is evidenced, obviously, by some of the tweets that or the responses to tweets that the Mercedes social media, whoever manages that social media account, was saying, right? At some point, somebody commented on this, on the Mercedes account for Twitter, hey, I hate this strategy, blah, 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 blah. Mercedes admin responds by saying, this was Lewis's idea, right? So I don't really know why they gained from that. Only to say, I think recently they put out a meme that had a picture of the W15 and a picture of the W11, which is arguably the best car that Mercedes has ever put out. Basically said, if you didn't love us at our worst, you cannot love us at our best. Again, are Mercedes fans, supposed to be happy with what they're currently seeing out of Mercedes. They're supposed to be okay with mediocrity, considering that they won 7 titles between 2 drivers, primarily obviously Lewis Hamilton, and one of those going to Nico Rosberg, and 8 consecutive constructors titles. So yeah, miss me with all of that. Mercedes, get your house in order. Wolf GPT, get your house in order. We'll see what happens in China. Yeah, I don't know. And by the way, still no answers on who's going to replace Lewis. So is it going to be Antonelli? Probably not. Is it going to be Fernando Alonso? Maybe. Is it going to be Carlos Sainz? Maybe. Is it going to be Max Verstappen? Definitely not. Max Verstappen would be nuts if he went to Mercedes. We'll see. Yeah, so just terrible showing by Mercedes. Sauber was another team, obviously, that I thought did well. I'm not going to say a lot. Their struggles continue. Zhou did not end up finishing the race. Hopefully he fares better next time we're out here, because it is his home race. We haven't raced in China in 5 years. Awesome. Their pit stops continue to be a problem. They need to get that in order before they convert over to Audi in 2026. I'm confident, obviously, that they will. I'm also confident that neither of those drivers are going to be on that team next year. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if, obviously, Valtteri Bottas stayed on the team, but I really feel like their targets are Nico Hülkenberg and Carlos Sainz. If they can't get one of those two, then it's going to be Valtteri Bottas and whoever. Or maybe they'll give some of their other drivers or reserve drivers a shot at it, right? Looking at Theo Pocher, for example, right? So yeah, not a lot from Sauber. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. I'm sorry. If you're a Sauber fan, a Kick Sauber Audi, Kick Sauber, I don't know what that team name is. Kick Sauber Steak Audi, Kick Sauber Audi Steak. If you're a fan of that team, yes, offense. I said what I said. Yeah. Anyways, person who had a decent race. Again, Alonso is another one. I'm clearly moving past Sauber, moving past all the team. Aston Martin needs to figure out what's going to happen. Lawrence Stroll may have pockets that are as deep as the Mariana Trench, but even he cannot solve the problem of one driver who is an underperforming driver who's not really bringing much to the team. The problem, of course, is that other driver is his son, Lawrence, Papi Stroll. Figure out what's going to happen. Either you pull out your investment entirely from that team if you're not willing to give another driver a chance, or you have a serious sit down with Lance and say, hey, son, I love you. We really want this team to succeed. I don't want to continue losing money on this venture. We're going to go find another driver. That's probably not going to happen, but until it does, they are not going to get Adrian Newey. They're not going to get Yuki Tsunoda. They're not going to get a Carlos Sainz because, again, there's no guarantee that Fernando Alonso is going to leave that team. And by the way, Fernando Alonso is 42 years old. And I will say this year more than any year, he is starting to look 42 years old. Not from a skill level, all right? Not from a skill level. He's starting to look old. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens. By the way, side note, it's also interesting that they never question Fernando Alonso's age, but they always question Lewis Hamilton's age. And by the way, Lewis Hamilton is younger, looks younger than Alonso, more successful than Alonso. But for whatever reason, only his age is called into. You know what? I'm going to leave it there. Yeah, another team moving past Aston Martin, I've talked about that. They need to get that house in order. Another team that's doing really great, and I really should apologize to, is Haas. Shouts out to Haas and Eyo Komatsu for what he is doing with that team. I feel like he is a great replacement. Apologies, because obviously he was relatively unknown outside of I don't know. He was unknown in terms of what he would do as a technical principal. Obviously, within Formula One, we know that he's got a great technical mind. He's a great engineer. But Komatsu is doing a great job. He clearly stated that he is trying to build back or regain that trust that Gene Haas lost in the team. My question for Gene was, why did you keep Gunther Steiner in as long as possible? Especially considering that Steiner was essentially publicly criticizing the team, essentially publicly saying like, hey, we are not going to be a team that aspires to be more than 8th in the constructor. Okay, what are you going to do to build that? Now, Haas has been doing great. And actually is going to be a team that might not be a terrible landing spot for Oliver Behrman if they want to bring him up into the ranks of F1. Now, if they lose Nico Hülkenberg, which I think they will, that empty seat would be a great place for Behrman to get his bearings, because that car, again, they get a lot of their parts, and their engine from Ferrari is doing really well, so it will prove a great training ground for Behrman. You can keep Magnussen on, because Magnussen is a driver that would be good for Behrman to be under, not because I feel like he's better than Behrman, but whatever. And Hülkenberg goes to Audi, which, again, Audi will want him because they're a German car manufacturer. Hülkenberg is German. The stories write themselves, but Haas is doing really great. They're scoring some points. Those drivers, again, they also figured out the tire deck situation because, again, Ferrari links. And so we'll see. But what's going to happen with them next year? I don't know. But it's definitely looking interesting. The driver market in general is looking interesting. So, yeah, overall, I would say that this race was pretty interesting. I love Suzuka as a track. It's really nice rain track. It's really nice non-rain track. It's a drive, or it's a track that drivers love. It's a track that fans love. The fans in Suzuka are great. So overall, just a really great race, mainly because it wasn't completely in total domination by Red Bull. Yes, they did finish on the podium 1-2. Congratulations. But it felt like a race where strategy really played into effect. So we'll see what happens moving forward. So that's it for Suzuka. The next time out is going to be in China, where we have not had a race there in 5 years. Really great that one's back on. It's also going to be the first sprint race of the season. Sprints. Yeah, and a home race for Guan Yu Zhou Guan Yu. Right. So, yeah, that is it for the Monoplaza F1 podcast. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe. As always, tell your tios, your tias, your mamis, your papis, your primos, your primas, abuelos, abuelas. For the Monoplaza F1 podcast, I am Emi Vertre. Peace.